welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of a great many books. This is quite a prolific author who is here today to talk about one in particular that has been an absolutely great ride. It is such a fun read. I am loving all of the characters, and it's a really hooky plot, but also with real characters that you really grow to love rather quickly. And I'm so excited to talk about this book. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yes, I am Julia London, and I'm the author of Rules for Aging and Larceny.
Before we talk about your newest book, I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about your career and your journey as a writer and perhaps some of your other works.
Yeah, well, I've been at it a long time. This is my 29th year in publishing. I just can't believe it myself, but I started off in historical romance, and I think that's where I developed my name. I mean, I wrote like 25 of them for 25 years. I mean, I wrote a lot more than 25. Somewhere along the way, I kind of went off into contemporary romance. And after the death of mass market, basically, which is where a lot of historical romance was published, I just kind of like moved into different things. I've been trying new things. And so I've done some women's fiction. I've done this. This is the first time I've kind of ventured into, I'm calling it crime fiction. I don't know exactly where it fits in the genre, but I've written over 70 books now. So yeah, I've been at it a long time.
Yeah, that's a truly impressive number of books, especially over the number of years that it occurred over. What inspired the look at a new genre, the venture into crime? Was it a particular like character or moment of life that you wanted to explore? Just wanted to shake things up, make it fun again? Like what inspired it?
Yeah, one of the things I know about myself is that if I can write about funny things, I'm a much better writer. I'm not very good at like the dark, angsty kind of writing. And I was just thinking a lot about how women of a certain age become invisible to society after a time. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to write about women of a certain age? They're in their 70s in this book, the four women, but then give it a twist, like something you really wouldn't expect of them. And robbing a Las Vegas casino is one thing you would not expect of them. So that's kind of where it came from.
It's, it's such a brilliant idea because, as you say, it plays with the invisibility of older women in our society and how, so often that is obviously a barrier and a restriction and a struggle, but they're able to turn it to their advantage in order
Yes.
to plan a heist, which is so fascinating to me. So, in terms of these women, was there one who came to you first? Who did the story start with?
Yeah, I think Frances is the main character. I would call her the main character. I mean, it's an ensemble cast. It really, we've been pitching it as Golden Girls meets Ocean's 11. So it is like the four Golden Girls, but Frances is the main one. And I guess she came to me first because I relate to her more. She's still playing pickleball and she runs and she's got her Jane Fonda workout and her husband has died recently before the book started. And she's at an age where, I guess when you used to retire, you'd have like 10 or 15 years, but not anymore. You have a lot of life left after retirement or somebody dies. And she's in her early 70s and it's, like, what's next? And I had kind of, I mean, I'm not quite that old, but, you do start thinking about like, I've still got another 30 years left, like what am I going to do with that time? And so she is the one looking for something to look forward to. And what she wants to look forward to is getting her old group back together and maybe going for one last big heist. And I should say they were a girls' gang in the 70s, in the 1970s, before, girl gangs were cool. they, they were by circumstance and they had a falling out, but that's what's important to her now. So I think she's the one I relate to the most. But all of them, all four of them, I have, there are parts of them that I relate to.
Mm. Yeah, they're all very relatable. And I'm glad that you brought up the that Ocean's 11 meets Golden Girls sort of pitch because I think it was about 10 years ago that Golden Girls ended up back on Hulu where it just became available to a younger generation of viewers. And I think a new generation discovering it has led to a new appreciation for it and perhaps like a new willingness to discuss this later part of life that
Yeah.
as we said a couple times, like tends to be invisible and sort of a mystery as you enter it.
And especially if you've, like most women, they've been raising families, working all their lives. And then you just get to a point where all that, like your kids graduate and you're not working anymore. And it's like, what do you do with your time? It sounds very enticing when you're in the middle of raising kids and not working. But then when you're not, it's like, what am I doing? Like, what am I looking forward to? And I really liked, I made the invisibility their disguise. They disguise themselves as like, I mean, I just imagined walking into a casino and you can look down the row of slot machines and you see a lot of elderly people at the slot machines, and you probably couldn't pick any of them out of a crowd later. And, that's the way they kind of disguise themselves. They just blend into that older crowd that nobody's looking at.
A needle in a stack of needles, as I think they
Yeah.
say in Saving Private Ryan. Um, so we've talked about the character that you relate to the most and who you sort of connected with and visualized the most early. Was there a character that was the hardest to crack for you? Was there someone whose voice or perspective took a little longer to find?
Well, certainly, Irene, because she's still a criminal. So that was a little harder to do, but I would say probably Edie. And what became interesting to me about Edie is, she's in the book, she's married and has four grown children, grandchildren, has a beautiful life in Tennessee, except that her husband's a cheater. And I wasn't quite sure like where Edie was going to end up. And she ended up surprising me. And it made me think about how a long-term marriage takes on so many different looks for so many different people. I mean, the rules are different for every couple, and they had come to their set of rules, which I won't reveal, but I didn't know that was going to happen. Um, and I was really surprised by it, but then it kind of made sense for me too.
Her introductory chapter it is so funny. And there is like a wit that all the characters have that perhaps uh softens, some of their like harder to identify with traits.
Yeah.
Because Frances is a little prickly at times. She's got the aggressive, like competitive edge.
Yeah.
Edie is like in this like very toxic, abusive competition
Yeah.
with her community. But they are so, so funny that I think it makes you root for them, even if you don't really approve of what they're doing or saying in the moment.
Well, that's awesome to hear. I'm glad because that's what I was going for.
I'd love to talk about the thoughts that drove how you depict both women's friendships over time, over, decades here, especially what breach and repair look like over that long a time. Because to keep it vague, they have a falling out in the sort of the heady 70s heist days. And they are coming together, not really having ever resolved it or addressed it. How did you intend to depict, I guess, like the complexity of women's friendships over such a long stretch of time when we really are like several different people over that many time? That might,
Yeah, we really are.
yeah.
Well, there's two things to that. I think one is, and I try not to speak just for, I am speaking just for women because I don't know if this is the same for men, but I think some of those friendships you form in your teens are so important and like really stand out. And, even though I've lost, contact with people, I do still have friends from when I was a teenager. And it does still feel like we're teenagers when we're together, like we're those same people. And those friendships are so foundational to who we become. And then the second thing about that is with time comes wisdom. And I think that, something that was done wrong to you when you're in your 20s, in hindsight, you're like, I can kind of see the other viewpoint, and
Mhm.
maybe it's not so important to hold that grudge. And maybe it is important to hold that grudge, but you just don't for whatever reason. Like it's too much trouble to be that angry all the time. And I think that happens too. So when these women get together 40, 50 years later, that friendship that they had is still so important, but some of the things that happened to them are maybe not as important as they were in the moment. Although it was a pretty big deal. I mean, the FBI was on their tail, but
Yeah.
but they got over it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really fascinating because if you think of it, those long-term relationships are the ones that sort of give us our own continuity over time. Because over our lives, we are so many different people. We're different
So many
people at
different people.
work and with our families and with our friends and all these things. And it's those long-term relationships that give you, I think, a sense of continuity about the things about you that are always the same, no matter like who you are with
Mhm.
and when it is and what phase of your life it is. I really liked your point too about sort of how time does sort of change our priorities and our feelings about the past. Because when you think about it, when you're in your 20s, it's that same like that passion and heightened feeling that you're capable of that let them do what they did with their sort of
Right.
like do-gooder heist movement. Yeah, it's like, and those, your emotions change over time and how you relate to all those things. I kind of lost the question in there, but it did make me think a lot about, my friendships that have been around for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think it's like maybe think of it in terms of like couples that get divorced and years later they're friends again, because whatever happened in that moment that was so volatile and you broke up, after time it's like, yeah, I really felt something for this person once before and there's still part of them in there and you can still be friends, Not everybody, but some divorced
Yeah.
couples are. And it's kind of, I thought it was kind of the same with them. Like in hindsight, they probably knew that it was going to have to come to an end anyway. Um, well, Francis didn't know it, but the rest of them did. And so, and so in hindsight, it wasn't nearly as bad with the passage of time.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, so when it comes to depicting their team up and the process of coming together in order to do the big one last job with the capital OLJ, um, how do you balance the humor and both like the higher stakes and perhaps darker elements of the story because not to give anything away, it is like a really fun ride of a book and it's very funny and witty and fast paced, but there are some more difficult issues that come up that have to do with aging and mortality. Like how do you fine tune like humor and the sadder emotions so that they enhance each other rather than take away from each other, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. And I have been asked this question before, not just with this book, but a couple others I've written that have deeper subjects, but it's still funny. All I know is that I like funny. So I tend to read funny. I tend to watch funny. And I think in my own family, in my own life, there's never been anything that's happened to us that there wasn't something funny about it along the way, And so I think that's the way I write. Even though you're dealing with tough subjects, there's always something that, this just sounds horrible to say that can be laughed at, but you just got to find like the humor in everything. And I tend to do that personally on my in my real life, which may not make me the best person to hang out with in times of crisis, but I can't help it. And so it's just the way I am, I think.
Hmm. Maybe that is what it is. There's kind of two ways that humor can manifest. There's humor in the plot of like absurd things happening and people's reactions to developments, but then there is also humor as a character trait too, because characters can use it to relate to each other and to either be defensive or vulnerable with each other, whatever, what have you. So I think
Yeah,
that's maybe what it is that all the humor also feels authentic too.
right.
The
And I
people.
think, I'm one of those people that if there's something difficult going on with me and people want to help me, I tend to diffuse with humor. And I think, that's part of it too. And I think some of these characters did the same thing.
Mhm.
Like instead of being the person that needed him the most, they didn't want that. They wanted to be like, make lighter of it than the situation called for. So
Absolutely.
she could deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It does
Yeah.
help the person going through it as well, not just the people around them. So that's
Yeah.
good. So do you think you'll write more books in this world? Do you foresee a return to romance? What is in your what's on your writerly horizon right now?
Well, I don't know if I will. This opportunity came up and I took it. This has been like categorized as mystery and thriller, and I'm not really good at writing that. I mean, I know that about myself. Like I was telling you, I don't know what the red herrings are. And when I read a mystery or thriller, I'm the person most gobsmacked by everything that happens. I did not see that coming. But I love the world I created and I love the friendships. I would love to keep them going. And so I guess that's a discussion to be had with my agent and publisher. I'm still doing like a couple of women's fiction books. I wrote Everything is Probably Fine and Nice Work Nor November that deal with issues for women. It's also humorous, but issues a lot of women face. And so I'm doing a couple of more of those books. And then for reasons that escape me, I'm writing. Well, I actually had a publisher I'd worked with a very long time ago ask me if I would be interested in writing a romantasy. And I said no. I mean, because like I've told you, I don't do the angsty stuff. And I said, the only thing I've ever really read in fantasy, I've read quite a bit of it, but it's been more like the Terry Pratchett kind of thing or the TJ Klune sort of thing, where there's a lot of humor. And they said, "Well, would you write a funny fantasy?" And I thought, "Yeah, So I've done that. So that comes out in next March. So yeah, I've reached a point in my career where I'm able to try different things on and see how they fit, and that's kind of what I'm doing.
Nice. Well, first off, I I so resonated with your description of yourself as a mystery reader because I am also the most incredulous reader when I'm reading a mystery. Like, I don't read to predict or to figure out who's guilty or what's going to happen or what the twist is going to be. I'm there for like character and vibes. And so
Yeah, yeah,
I'm always surprised by mysteries.
me
But
too. Shocked.
yeah. But to your point about all those great things in the works, yeah, I'm very excited to see that funny fantasy because that's also a genre in which I feel pretty at home. Yeah, and thank you for, sharing this book and your thoughts on writing with our show. I am so excited to recommend this book to particularly we have a title swap with some ladies who come in every month to get book recommendations. So I think they're really going to like this one.
It is astounding to me because I've been around talking about it to different groups, and it's all, readers are mostly women. And so I'll start talking about some of these women, and I can see them in the audience just nodding their heads. Like I said something about how, when you're 70 and you are going to do a heist, there are different things you have to consider. For example, you got to have elastic in your clothes because if you are arrested, and the chances are good you will be, you can't be sitting on a hard metal bench with something digging in your waist. And everybody's like, yes, yes, you're absolutely right. Also, where are the bathrooms? Need to make sure we know where all the bathrooms are. So I've just been really heartened to see how many women are relating to the kind of things I'm talking about in this book. So I'm anxious to see how it does.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there were a lot of knowing nods when I described this books to some folks, and I think it is nice to shed light on a period of life that, in both, I think, our entertainment and in medicine, just really goes uncommented on a lot. So it's
It
illuminating in
does.
many
It
ways.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. This has been a really lovely chat, and I'm so glad that we got to talk about your book today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Very welcome. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. By the time that you hear this, the book will be out in the world. So you can head to your favorite bookstore or library website, wherever you like to go for your books. Do you happen to have a favorite bookstore that you like to send folks to?
Yeah, I live in the Austin area of Texas, and there's a bookstore in Georgetown, Texas, which is a suburb, LARCENY, and I love that bookstore. They're independent bookstores especially just have such a great community built around them, and that one happens to be in my community. So yeah, that's one I send people to.
Oh, excellent. I love to encourage bookstore tourism. And it's also, I'm building my own list. So it's very, yeah,
Yeah.
lovely.
There's so many that have cropped up lately, independent bookstores. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's you could make a weekend of it just in Central Texas alone. So
Oh, love to hear that. Yeah, there is this beautiful resurgence. And I think those local stores are just, they're so much more interesting and they have so much more character and they're really hubs for the community. So,
yeah, they really are.
yeah. All right. Well, it's like our third ending now. So, but thank you all
Yeah.
for joining us. And it is now
Thank you.
time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.